saw the source of all this energy, of all this intelligence, in characteristic was basically harmonious. That harmony was the rule of the universe. And that's why the planets were not colliding. And that's why the sun rose every day. And that's why everything went. And on discovering this harmony, it fell in on me. I would go out into the streets. People would look at me, smile, and say hello. When I'd want to park my car, people from the sidewalk, 2, 3 of them at a time sometimes, would get off the sidewalk and help direct me into a tight parking spot. Policemen, taxi cab drivers would give me their parking spot when I couldn't find one. Everything was falling into line for me at that time. I don't think I ought to say this. I never would meet a red light. That's the extreme. I could drive from New York City and not meet a red light.
I began imaging things that I wanted. Small things. And they came very quickly. Then I realized the only thing that stopped me from getting something big was I just didn't dare to think big. So I asked myself, now what's the biggest thing I can think of in the way of things? And I said, gee, a Cadillac with a specially built body. So I pictured a Cadillac with a specially built body, and I saw myself riding in it, and it was mine, and I dropped it. In about 2 weeks, an acquaintance came to me and said, Lester, I just bought you the most beautiful Cadillac. And he described it. It was the color I had in mind. Everything just like I had seen it. He said a friend of mine bought it, got a specially built body, but he doesn't want it, and I got it for only $4,000. He said that, I looked at him, I didn't have the money. He said, oh, don't worry about the money. He says, I'll pay for it.
However, overnight, I thought about it. I had just gotten rid of my car. It was a nuisance in New York City. It was far cheaper to go by taxi and far, far more convenient than it was to own your own car. So I had given up my car. And I said, this car will be just a nuisance like the one I had before. And also, I did not want to be in a position where I would be the envy of man. And thirdly, I said to myself, well, if I've done it now, I can do it at any time I want. And so the next day I refused it and turned it down. And I tested it again and again. Of course, before the Cadillac, I tested on small things, and I discovered it worked. Then I realized I was limiting myself. And that's what caused me to think, well, what's the greatest thing I can think of? Cadillac, special built body. And I let go of the limitation, and I visualized that as being mine. And it came to me. Then I dared even further. It was cold, and I wanted a short vacation of 2 weeks in warm country. And Los Angeles was furthest away from New York City, further than Florida. So I said, well, I'm having a vacation in Los Angeles over the Christmas, New Year holidays. With full confidence that everything is A-OK and taken care of, I walked out of the house. I immediately bumped into a man I hadn't seen for many, many years. He said, "Hey, Lester, I've been looking for you. Remember that money I owed you? I've been wanting to pay you. I didn't know what happened to you." And he paid me enough money to buy me a round-trip TWA ticket to Los Angeles, which I did, and immediately left. When I got to Los Angeles, it occurred to me to call an old friend who said, "Oh, I'm so happy you called, Lester. We just got a new apartment. We have an extra room, and you must stay with us. Where are you?" They picked me up. The next morning, I was in the kitchen thinking, "Oh, gee, here I am in Los Angeles without a car. It's like being without your legs." And I said, "Well, that's taken care of," and I dropped it. The next thought came, call Burl, an old friend that I had driven some years earlier from New York to Los Angeles. I called Burl, and he said, "I've been thinking of you, Lester. Where are you? I want to see you. I'm coming right over." And he was over to see me in a matter of about 15 minutes. And we're having coffee over the kitchen table. And without my asking, he puts his hands in his pocket, takes his keys out, throws it to me over the table and says, "You've got my car as long as you stay here. I have no need for it. I'm living near the studio, and I walk to work." I said, "Thank you." So I had everything I needed by that time. And after, about 10 days, I got the feeling, well, I want to go back to New York. It was about January the 3rd. I called up TWA, and they said, "Oh, I'm sorry. We have no reservations for 30 days, all taken up, and we can't even put you on a waiting list because the waiting lists are 30 or more people." I just said, "Thank you," and I hung up, and I said, "Well, who needs a reservation? When you feel like going, go." So the next morning I woke up and I asked myself, "Do you want to go?" I says, "Yeah, I think I want to go." "Okay, pack your bags and go." I packed my bags. I got down to the airport about 10 o'clock. Asked where the planes depart from New York, for New York. Went to the gate, and the man was loading a plane for New York. And I said, "Are there any non-shows?" He said, "Oh, yes, there is one, but wait until I load everyone. Just stand here." While he was loading, a woman asked the same question. He said, "I don't know, madam, but if you stand behind this man, we'll find out." They put her behind me. He loaded the plane, walked right toward me, put his hand around me, took this woman by the arm, and put her on the plane. As far as I was concerned, everything was 100% okay. He came back to me, and his jaw dropped, his mouth opened when he realized what he had done. So I had to calm him down instead of him calming me down. And when I calmed him down, I said, "Well, when's your next plane?" He says, "Oh, in about an hour." "Oh, there it is coming in right now." Well, he put me on that plane, which got me to New York 2 hours earlier than the one he took me off, and it was a non-stop flight. The first one I ever had cross-country. At that time, they all made at least one stop. And non-stop flights were new at that time. This was in days of the DC 6s and 7s, the Constellations. There were no jets at that time. It wasn't too easy for them to make cross-country non-stop flights. Then I remembered when I hung up and said, "Who needs a reservation?" I said, "Not only that, I want my first non-stop flight cross-country." And that was the reason for his putting me off that flight and putting me on the next one. And so I got back to New York, started out with no money, and came back with no money. One morning, about 2 o'clock in the morning, with hardly no traffic on the West Side Drive in New York City, I was going along about 10 miles above the speed limit, which isn't bad at 2 o'clock in the morning and no cars around. And all of a sudden, from nowhere, there was a policeman behind me ordering me to drive off the ramp. I went off the ramp and he gave me a ticket for speeding. The next day I was going in the opposite direction of town on East Drive in the midday. I decided to pass a car. And as I was passing him, I went 5 miles an hour above the speed limit and got a ticket for it. And after the second ticket, I said, something's wrong here. What am I doing to cause this? And I was thrown back to just a few days prior when I was saying to myself, I should cut out this speeding habit I have. I can't seem to do it. How can I do it? Well, some good tickets will do it for you. At the time, it's sort of like daydreaming, and I wasn't aware of what I was doing. But when I asked what did I do to cause this, that thinking came up. I looked at it, and I dropped it and reversed it. And the speeding tickets stopped. I had thought that what formerly I thought was so real and solid wasn't real and solid. It was a product of my mind. And therefore my solid concrete foundation was cracking. And I knew I had to let go of it. It was not easy to let go of something I spent most of my life building up. That caused me to shake. I could tell that the adhesion of my stomach and duodenum was undone because formerly, from the peristaltic movements of them that were not together, I used to feel as though my whole stomach were jumping up and down. And after this healing, I never experienced that again. And therefore, I knew that all the other things that I thought were corrected, were healed. My heart was 100% okay because after that I would exercise strenuously and nothing bothered me. I once walked out of the house feeling fully convinced that I need no money, that I am going to eat. And as I walked along the street, I met a friend who said, "Hi, Lester," started talking to me and invited me out for lunch. There was another time I went out without money, knowing I was going to eat, and I saw a $5 bill on the ground, and I picked it up, and that paid for it. The reason for my proving things should be that in order to ensure myself that I wasn't kidding myself, I held on to a maxim that I only know that which I can do, and therefore I proved everything by doing it. Cinerama was a new thing. I decided one day I want to see it. Tickets, I didn't know at that time, were impossible to get, but I knew I was going to see the picture. Walking down Broadway, I stopped into a sandwich shop right near the theater and ordered a sandwich. And the man asked me, "Are you going to Cinerama?" I said, "Yes." He said, "The show is going to begin in a few minutes." I said, "Oh, that's all right." He says, "Well, you have your ticket, don't you?" And I said, "No." He said, "You'll never get in there." I said, "Oh, I'm going to see it." I ate my sandwich. When I got to the theater, it had already started. And I couldn't get anywhere near the window because there must have been 60, 70 people between me and the window. However, the doorman in uniform was standing right alongside the window, and he looked at me and motioned, "What do you want?" And I put my finger up, "One." He made motion, "Okay." He got one ticket, broke through the crowd, gave it to me, and told me the price of it. I gave it to him, and I walked right in. I know the show had been on only for about 5-10 minutes. I didn't miss much of it. I had my seat, and I saw a very unusual thing. You're watching a movie, and you feel as though you're right in the... What was that thing? The little roller coaster and things like that. It was beautiful. It was a real interesting principle they had. So nothing's impossible, and everything falls into line. I didn't even have to break through the crowd to go to the window to ask, "Will you give me a ticket, please?" The doorman saw me, asked me what I wanted, over the heads of everybody. He was tall. I just put my finger up one, got the ticket, brought it out to me, and I went right in. No wait. The wonderful feeling that goes with all these unusual things is not the unusualness of it, but the feeling of God in operation. When you see the God part of you, when you know that your very essence is God, that is a delightful thing. And when things are happening, it's not you, it's God as you're feeling. And this feeling of God in operation is the most wonderful of feeling. The miraculous or unusualness of it means nothing to you. But the oneness with God is the greatest of all feeling. Yeah, when I started my search, I was a very convinced and absolute materialist. The only thing that was real was that which you could feel and touch. My world was as solid as concrete. My understanding of the world was as solid as concrete. And when some of these revelations came to me, that the world was just a result of my mind, that the world was an afterthought of my mind, that thinking determined all matter, that matter had no intelligence, that our intelligence determined all matter and everything about it. But when I saw that the solidity that I formerly had was only a thought itself, my nice, solid, concrete foundations began to crack. "20 years of build-up began to tumble, and my body shook, and shook so much I just shook for days. I just shook like a nervous old person. I knew that that concrete view I had of the world was never going to be again. But it didn't drop away gracefully with ease. For days I actually shook, until I think I shook the whole thing loose. Then my view was just the opposite of what it had been once previously. But the real solid thing was not the physical world. It was not my mind, but something which was much greater. The very essence, the very beingness of me was the reality, that it had no limits, that it was eternal, and that all that formal thing I saw was the least of me rather than the all of me. That the all of me was my beingness. I saw that I was responsible for everything that was happening in this universe, that I was responsible for the least action of the farthest individual or person or being in this universe. Because my beingness was the one and only beingness that was the cause of everything. It was my beingness that did the thinking. My beingness created the mind. My beingness created the mind, and the mind created the body. The basic source of everything is simply our beingness. Someday you'll see it. You created this whole universe. It goes from infinity to infinity, and you created it. You'll see it someday. So what do you need when you see that? Nothing. So the slightest thought you have for anything comes to you immediately. A harmony of living. Well, after this 3-month period, I wanted to prove everything, knowing that I was going to try to convey this to the rest of me. The first thing I decided to do was to become a millionaire. To prove to the world that anyone can be a millionaire. Just by the conviction of it, anyone can be a millionaire. So I went into the real estate business with no cash, and I was buying apartment houses through mortgages and loans. With no effort, these things were coming into me until I had built up 23 apartment houses, 20 to 40 units each. Fell into me so easily. And then after I had it accumulated, then a higher thought came to me. Now drop this and walk out with just a shirt on your back. And from here on, produce everything you want at will when you want it. And since that time, that has been operating for me. Everything I need comes to me as I need it. And that's the way life should be for everyone. Just like it is for the sparrow. Do the birds have to work hard, struggle, and calculate and pile up in order to live? No. Everything's provided for. When the animals are thirsty, do they have to have maps to find out where water is? No. Instinctively, they're led right to it. And if God will take care of the animals and the birds, He will certainly take care of us. There's no need to accumulate. Accumulation is obviously a sign of insecurity. Everyone's convinced that he must do what he's doing in order to survive. And that's the only reason why he must do it. Everyone is right because our thinking makes it so. Whatever I think will happen. If I think all peoples are crooked, my experience with all people will be there trying to be dishonest with me. And if I trust everyone implicitly, I know from experience, I have trusted. When I was in the real estate business, one man who was known to be dishonest, I handed him $6,000 in cash to go buy a building. He took the money and says, "You trust me with this?" He says, "Yes." And he went through a gesture that I'm sure was most unusual for him. He hugged me. He says, "You got nothing to worry about." And he went out and he got the deal. He bought 3 apartment houses. It turned out be very profitable. And I split the profit with them. Every deal had to be a very harmonious deal. Everyone in it had a gain. I made sure if there were a broker in it, he got his full commission. If the seller was selling it, he benefited by getting what he wanted, the building sold. And if there was a lawyer, he got his share. Everyone benefited in every deal. And that's the way all deals should be. There's no need for anyone to suffer from a deal. Everyone should get what he wants out of it. Everyone should benefit. Every seller wants to sell. Every buyer wants to buy. Harmony is the basic law of the universe.